Yeah, so name and age.
Name and age, okay. First of all, I'm hard of hearing, so if you got your mask on, I can't read lips very good.
I'll
So
go ahead and
you're
I'll
okay.
yell it out.
Okay. The name's Ken Ackerman, born in 1955, so I'm 65 years old now that we speak. When is it? February of 2021.
Okay. So Ken, tell me about how you got your start in the woods.
Well, I graduated from high school in 1973. Worked at Sandy's gas station there since I was 15, and in them days the minimum wage was $1.65, which I was happy to work for. But I finally said I got to make more money, and my uncle Marvin Ackerman had logging trucks, and he hauled logs, and then he was running log loader for an outfit out of Shelton called JX Logging, Halden Johnson, up the Skoke. He had 2 or 3 sides going, running from daylight till dark in the summer when I graduated in '73 on Rocky Brook Pass.
Okay.
So I went up there with my motorcycle one night to talk to him. My uncle said they needed somebody. So the guy hired me right there on the spot, and my uncle told him, oh yeah, well, Ken, he drove my logging truck. Well, when Marvin had his logging truck, I was probably 10 years old. Yeah, I drove it around the field or something, but I really didn't know what the hell I was doing. So Halden says, jump in that truck and back it in here. Well, they had a landing on a real narrow, steep slope, which is straight down on each side. And if you've had to back down a landing or up a landing with no landmarks on each side, looking in the mirror, 17, 18 years old, I got it back there, but then got the trailer off, and hell, I didn't know which glad hand went where, so they hooked me up and got in the truck, and he says, okay, now you're loaded. And I knew it looked like a big load, but I'm just a dumb kid. I don't know any better. So down the mountain I went. He says, just take it down there and park it. Well, we ran 2 shifts, and I started setting chokers on the second shift, working at night with Hungarian Mike Kelly, which we used to hook for Simpson.
Okay.
Very, very good logger, smart, knew what he was doing. We were out a long ways, and we'd set chokers, and then it didn't get dark till 10 o'clock. So 9 o'clock, it's still probably 80 degrees or so, and all of a sudden there's a big duffel bag coming out on the carriage. Well, they'd send beer out.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, I don't know if I want to work there. Well, this guy was from Hungary, and I couldn't understand him, and he'd, Kenneth, you grab the hemlock. Well, hell, I'd look, and they were all hemlocks to me. So,
Yeah.
but that was my first start. Well, then a month or so of doing that, the boss says, well, you want to learn to climb. We got to swing blocks. In days, both yarders that he had was tree rigged,
Okay.
110 foot or 120 foot. The biggest tree on the claim was what your spar tree was. Had 7 guy lines on the top and 3 or 4 buckle guys about 70 feet up.
Wow.
So never being in climbing gear, the boss says, yeah, just do this, do that. So I get up there, and I finally made it up, scared as hell, to the buckle guys. And of course, then I got to untie and go over the top of the buckle guys to get to the top to swing the blocks.
Holy cow.
So finally he's going, now Kenneth, don't do anything foolish. Well, hell, I didn't know what foolish was and what wasn't, but I had to untie, and I thought through the years, of course, I finally figured out that you render, I'm left-handed, so I put my knot on the left side.
Okay.
So when I come to the guy line that I wanted to go over, the first thing I did the first time around was just unhook my rope, and of course it drops. And still at the buckle guys, it was, I don't know, 2.5, 3 feet. It was still a big tree. So there my rope is hanging down at my ankles, and I'm hanging on to the buckle guys. Well, obviously to throw that rope, I need to undo one. Well, I was scared as hell. You grab that big rope and try to throw it around, and it'd hang up on this one, hang up on that one. Well, I finally learned through the years, to hang on to the buckle guy, tie it off on this one, come around and grab it. Well, when you're 17 and dumb and stuff, and the spurs kick out of them big old growth fur that were that thick, and you take a step and you're hanging like that, and then the rope's hanging down. But finally I got up around, and of course in them days we was using the hay wire to swing the blocks, and these blocks was nothing like these guys are packing now. They probably weighed 500-800 pounds, huge.
Wow.
The bull block. So you take the hay wire, had a pass line up at the top of this tree, hook into that, pick it up, pick the block up, go ahead on the hay wire, hope like hell it ain't raining because the brake don't hold on the hay wire, And then when you tell them stop, then you unshackle it, swing the strap the other way and put the block on the other side, and then slack the hay wire, and you're good. Then you got to do the same on your haul back. And that was my first experience. And then from then on, I would be involved in the rig up. So when you're done with the unit, it wasn't like push a button, let the tower down and move the next landing. You had to take and let each guy line down, hold the tree with the yarder, lay the tree down on the ground, and then hook onto it with the D7, and down the mountain you went to the next landing, the next setting, then reverse image of what you just did, raise that tree back up. And if you've been around it, some of the older guys might know, me and my cousin Mike McCone, he was older than me, been in the woods, so I was kind of listening to him. I was just green as hell. And when you swing the landing, you have a stump that is notched. Each stump has 3 wraps, and you got 21 spikes, railroad spikes. So you're pulling the tree up, you got the tree up in the air, you got your first wrap on. You always nail your spikes on what's called a dead end, a tail end. Well, we didn't know any better. My cousin should have, and we nailed it on the bite side, because that's where the spikes were before. And when we blew for slack on that haul back, which was pulling it up with a block and a bite, that tree headed right for the yarder.
Oh no.
And my boss come up there, and I'm just a young kid, and he looked at me and he says, I know you didn't know, but Mike, you should know better. And Mike did. He was all embarrassed, because he said just last week, a yarder operator for Simpson did the same thing, identical same thing. Nailed on the wrong side, went to slack it, it didn't hold, and bam, come across the yarder, killed the yarder operator.
Wow.
So then after you get it nailed on the first one, then you slack the line down, throw a wrap in it, pull it tight, another 7 spikes in that one, and slack it 3 times, times 10. So we had a saying, if you didn't show up on rig up day, don't come anymore, because you're done, because it's a workhouse. You're packing spikes in 5-gallon pails up to these stumps, uphill, downhill, wherever, and then get the buckle guys all up. So it was a real good experience. I'm glad to be part of it, where a lot of these guys nowadays don't know how to do that. Then from there, they says, well, we need a truck driver, or first it was a loader operator. We had, in them days, everything was cable machines, scissor boom. So my uncle designed and built a scissor boom for which would be classed as a crane today. You had 2 drums. One drum was working your back, the other one was working your stick boom, main boom and stick boom. You had an air grapple, nothing more than a set of tongs with an air cylinder inside. And the bad thing about it was you didn't have about 180 degree swing. If you went to endo a log, the truck drivers always want to butt ahead or the opposite direction. You go to endo it, then if you wrapped it up too tight, you'd cut the little 9/16 choker. So I started running that, and they were old rickety American hoisting derricks. Didn't travel, just like, everything was wore out. I did that for, I don't know, a year or so, running log loader for them, and then they had me running cat, and then driving logging truck. Well, we need a log truck driver, so then I started out. We had a 1958 Kenworth that had a 220 Cummins with a turbo 262, and we pulled the engine out, stuck an 8B71 in it. 5 and a 4, 2-speed Eaton rear ends out of another wreck truck that he had that was newer, and I hauled with that for 3 years. I worked for him, and then we did anything and everything. I mean, you kind of had to be. In the wintertime, you were working in the shop down at Shelton, working on trucks, working on yarders, and I was fortunate to be able to work with my uncle, because he taught me a lot about pulling wrenches, which got me through the rest of my life, because I've been a mechanic and stuff working since then. And after I got tired of driving to Shelton, we was working way up Govey, and the job didn't start at that time until I got to the landing, because I was getting 30% of what the truck made. So 18 years old, you could make 2 trips one day, and if you were really ambitious on a long day, you could get 3 to Tacoma, down the canal. So that would pay me $150 a day, so that wasn't bad. Then we got snowed out in the wintertime, so I went to work for Wally Peterson in 1976. Started out running skidder, then running yarder, driving logging truck, there again doing anything and everything that you had to do. Then 1977, he had a little Washington TL6 track loader, and we was logging over by Maury Anderson's up above the Quilcene log dump, and he had just signed a contract for Jolly Green Giant sale in the Olympic National Forest, which was the biggest timber sale ever sold in the National Forest on
Really?
the peninsula. 19 million board feet. So Seaboard Timber out of Seattle bought the unit, and then Wally was the #1 logger at the time. He had we called it a little Edco, but it was this little double drum mounted on an old auto car truck. We started out with that, doing some of the jobs, and then a lot of the units was thinning. And in them days, we didn't have motorized carriages. I mean, they might have been experimenting with them, but they weren't out. So he bought the first 071 Medill to roll out of the plant in April of 1978. He had 3 guys that he said, try to run it. It was over at East Quill, above the log dump, took it over there and rigged it up. They had these 3 guys, and I won't mention any of their names because some of them are still alive. And they had a little bit of trouble, you might say quite a bit of trouble, after about a week, and it went on the landing, and they had orange cable that he bought from Crown Silver Black, that plastic coated cable.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked like a bunch of spaghetti laying on the landing,
no.
because they'd go to slack the drop line and didn't really understand it at the time, and it would just ball up. So the easiest thing was to take a torch and cut it out. So finally he had this other guy trying to run it, and it was the same thing. He had some issues. So then they drugged me out of that little track loader and says, come up there and try it. So I ran it for about a half an hour, and I says, well, first thing is, once this carriage gets out on the landing, off the landing, you have to look at on the landing. Can't just run it out in the brush, because you don't know if the drop line's up, down. Nobody knew. There was no instructions. Bought it from Cascade Logger Supply. A guy named Peter Parker was the salesman, but he didn't have a clue in the world how to set it up. Knew nothing about it. So I did it all on the landing, and I did it slow and watched, and then I understood exactly what had to happen, and then I ran it about a half a day, and we had logs coming in, and the landing was plugged, and Wally came up there and says, okay, guys, he's gonna run the yarder. And I thought, Jesus Christ, I don't even have a say-so, but he's gonna run the yarder. He's got it figured out. Well, these other guys got a long face and took off down the mountain, and then one of them had to set chokers and one had to hook. But then I ran it until I quit in 1986. So in 1978, when I got that yarder rigged up over here at East Quill, it was blowing to beat hell, and I laid them units out myself. There was a lot of alder in them, and I needed tail trees. With a 50-foot tower, you need to get off the ground. Guys would get those 071s later, and they try to high lead with them. They're not a high lead machine. You got no lift, you know. I mean, you can pop chokers all day, wide open, a 3/4 choker, you could pop it. So the wind's blowing, and I mean, it's blowing hard. And I says, trees are going down all over the place. And my tail trees, if they go down, we were getting, at that time, I was getting $8 a load, $1.50 a load bonus. And that was in 1978.
Wow.
To me, the more loads you got, the more money I got. So I'm going out and I'm gonna try to top the tail trees. The crew says, we're not working anymore. There's timber going down everywhere. It's bouncing across our haul back, and
Wow.
I said, that's it. I got to save them trees. So I go up the trees. We loaded out Nicky Ward that morning. That was his #1 log truck. And all of a sudden, I hear the damn truck coming up Lindsay Hill. What's going on? Why is Nicky bringing the load back? He comes up on the landing, and I'm up a tree about 80 feet. And I was topping them, and the trees are blowing over, and the tops are going, and I'm getting a hell of a ride. But I was dumb, and I lived for adrenaline rush. So Nicky says, you better get out of that tree. I says, well, hell, this tree has stood for 60 years. It ain't going anywhere. He says, yeah, the Hood Canal Bridge has stood for 30 years, and it just fell down in front of me, so I couldn't get over there.
Oh,
I says,
no.
wow, I guess it is blowing hard, Dad. So out of the tree I came. But I worked for Wally, running the yarder mainly, but I'd have to lay the units out. Then we got into those thinning units, and that was a whole nother ball game. You were allowed a 10-foot corridor, and it had to be no closer than 150 feet. So on the Forest Service ground, if you scratched the tree, you got paid triple stumpage. So the trees were marked in blue paint. Well, it took me a little while to figure it out, you know. If you had the lift, you could swing the tree. But they wanted as long as possible. So You know, they wanted 40-foot trees. So if you bucked a 40-foot tree and you didn't have lift, and you try to swing a log like this, it's a long radius. If you got lift and you can get the tree like that, that's fine. So I says there's two choices. Cut the trees shorter, so if you took a 26 off the butt on those big trees, I could lift and suspend and get lift up and swing them around, because if you touched the tree, you were done. So it was very hard for me to explain to the cutters that they needed the herringbone 45 that to the corridor, because if they got more than 60, 70, 80 feet out there and they started dumping them, then you were working into the tops. It's hard to explain, but it just got better for me to take and say, fall at 90 degrees to the corridors, and I will have to get the lift myself, because I'd get guys from Forks, from Alaska, they'd come down and get up the tree 20 feet, and oh geez, I'm scared. So that was it. I had to do it myself. So I'd get up them trees, you know, a tree like that, knock the top out at 80 feet, 2 3/4 guy lines in them, pull them tight with come-alongs, and you know, I've been in little trees where I've had to put buckle guys, but it's a lot of work. And I used to do it myself, you know, tie the stuff on the pass rope, get up the tree. Most of the guys had guys that had a guy on the ground helping pull the stuff up. But, you know, pulling those 80-pound blocks up through the years, you know, after 86, I blew my knee out. So I had to kind of give it up. After now, having 7 knee surgeries, I wish that I would have had a ground guy and did it. But, you know, I was naive and I just did what I had to do. And we did everything. Wally at one point had 7 sides going, 3 or 4 skidder sides, and it was always me that they would call when the trucks were upside down or the towers were pulled over. You know, you go up there and the shovels smash the tower, or the loader is on its side. Well, I was smart enough, because I learned from my dad when I was a kid, because he was just a little small-time logger, and I learned how to hang blocks. So a lot of times, I mean, I pulled a whole 600 Prentice mounted on a truck up past Townsend Creek. The driver jumped off. It broke the drive line. When it broke the drive line, it wrapped around the air lines. He had no air, and it was hydraulic steering. He couldn't steer and had no brakes, so he did the right thing. He just jumped off, and it went over the mountain Thanksgiving weekend. And I had to go up there, and I got it with a little Model H mountain logger, and I hung a whip on a 6-block purchase, because that's all I had for tail holds. But everybody was amazed that that little, you know, 10,000-pound machine could pull up that 80,000-pound log loader that was over the hill. But just because I learned young. So when logging went down, I became a mechanic for Glacier Northwest, and then I had to go to where the work was. When Clinton took the work away, I ended up in Seattle running crane for the last 23 years, and I just retired in March of last year. But on the logging end of it, I like to try to design stuff. Larry Ramsey was a guy that owned Cascade Logger Supply, and he made kind of one of the best drop line carriage. It was called a drum slack pulling carriage. So I was using the tag line to pull slack to drop the drop line, unlike these guys that's got the motorized carriages. The problem is you were working against the haul back real hard. So the harder you pulled the haul back, the further the turn would go up. And I thought there's got to be an easier way. So I took that carriage and I drawed up a little blueprint, had Dick Broders in Discovery Bay build us one on my version. And I had the mainline side of that drum way bigger, so I had more mechanical advantage. So I didn't have to hold as much haul back on it. So it would pick up before it wanted to pull ahead. That helped. Then I got thinking, how in the hell can I make a carriage that is locked when I come in? So I thought about it, and I thought, well, if I put a flange on it and make a brake band and then have an accumulator on there running up and down the skyline to charge the accumulator to work a hydraulic clamp and clamp it when it gets in. So I drawed up these blueprints, and one night, I don't know, it must have been in the early 80s, and we was at the shop, and this guy was in there, and I thought he was a logger. So I was telling him what I had planned, and I told him I had a blueprint that I had drawn up because I took mechanical drafting in high school. And he says, wow, can I come down and look at that? So I give him a picture of that. That's the last time I seen the picture. And about 2 months later, an outfit called Danabo in Eugene, Oregon was building those carriages. He was a spokesman for Danabo, and I've seen
Wow.
one down at the logging show down in Oregon. There's one sitting down there in the museum at Brooks, Oregon. And it's exactly almost 90% the way that I brought it up.
Wow.
So yeah, we did a lot of downhill and on those thinnings. The hard part about the thinning was you could take the whole month of June and I could be up Rocky Brook and not even see the top of the 90-foot tower or the 50-foot tower. It'd be that foggy. So when you were doing a thinning, if you went to do the next corridor and you couldn't see, you were done. Because I would mark the corridors in red paint. So when the cutters come along and I have them dump those red trees first, and then they could cross across the top 90 degrees. So I had a guy hooking and he says, we're going to be down until this fog goes. I said, what are you talking about? Well, that was my first experience. I says, no, we're going to change that. So I went up there at night with my motorcycle because the fog would clear off at night. And I went up a tree, I'd start in the tail end, and I'd mark it out 150 feet, and I'd go over to Reeves Hardware, and I'd buy those 99-cent cheap disposable flashlights, and I'd climb up the tree, put the flashlight in there, let it go, and go up on the road, 1,000, 1,500 feet away, and look through the trees and try to see that light. Then when I see that light, I'd take my compass, and I'd look at my compass, and I'd line it up, and I'd mark, okay, 32 degrees northeast, whatever it was, and I'd mark that down, and I'd take my tin hat, and I marked that all down inside my tin hat, but I didn't tell anybody what my secret was. Next week, it's all, and these guys, oh, we get to go to the bar because we can't see the top,
Oh,
we're shutting
yeah.
down. I says, oh no, we're gonna run the haywire right from here. You're gonna have side washes, it's gonna be crooked. And I'd have that degrees written in my hat, and I'd take and mark that and run the haul back down the next corridor. Lines would go up and it would be just completely no side washes hidden, and the guys couldn't figure out for a long time. But then finally one day I told them what I did.
Wow.
But it took a lot of thinking, and it was a challenge, and it was great, and I had to do it again. I would do it again. But when I went to Seattle, I hated, I mean, I enjoyed what I did, but dealing with the traffic every day and riding a motorcycle in the cold every day, you know, in the wintertime there'd be 6 inches of snow, and like a fool I'd take off. I turned 250,000 miles on that VTX Honda that I still got, that I rode every day. It didn't matter, rain, shine, Chehalis, Bellingham, whatever. I'd put about 300 miles a day, 6 hours a day on that bike. After I had back surgery and other issues, and I'd come to the stop sign in Seattle and I couldn't put my foot down, and I said I had to do something different. So I retired in March.
Wow. That's something else. Now, Ken, tell me about when Wally bought that Medill, and that was, you said it was the first one off the line, Kalama, right?
Yes.
Okay, and tell me about when you run yarder for him, and there was, you talked to, was it Sam or Pat, about going overseas for Medill?
Well, Wally sold his BU-80 Skagit, the hoist, was mounted on a Berger tower. And he sold it to a guy that we used to work with. Tim Rochelle was one of the spokesmen for the Filipinos over in the Philippines. And it went to the Philippines, and then my uncle Marvin Ackerman was working for Warehouse Surplus Yard at Shelton, and he sold him a bunch of off-highway Kenworths and yarders, and Tim Rochelle went over there to set these plants up and took my Uncle Marvin, and Marvin set a shop up to fix all of the junk warehouse or wore out stuff that they sent over there. So when they got over there, I ran the first Modelo 71, and they wanted to get something smaller and faster, so they wanted to take some of the Mo 71s over. So they asked me if I wanted to go over, and I says no, I didn't have any interest of going to the Philippines. I wasn't into where you had to worry about snakes and animals that were going to kill you, plus the heat. Well, I kept trying, and they were sweetening the pot. Well, one of the guys that started Buck Mountain, Ray Buckman, he went over there, and another guy that worked with my Uncle Marvin at Shelton, I think Mike Pierce is his name, they went over there, and then they were taking, it was a civilian war because Marcos was the ruler of the Philippines at the time. And he was just like, yeah, we own that, just go over there and start cutting it. So the Filipinos didn't know what to do, so they got the Americans to come over there, loggers, and show them what to do, and all you had to do is point, take that haywire, pull that, cut that tree, whatever. And my uncle came back with pictures of the Filipinos rigging tail trees and moccasins or sandals, and they're just hanging on with no climbing gear. The monkeys would hang on the haulback at night, and then in the morning you'd fire it up and crack the throttle on the haulback and suck them through the blocks. But I still had no interest in going over. So when they pulled out of there and was coming home, Ray Buckman was from Port Angeles. The guy that was sitting in the airplane alongside of him, the Filipinos were shooting at the plane and they hit him, and I think it killed him. And when they come back and told me, yeah, you can make a lot of money over there, I says, no, I don't want to go. So I stayed over here. And then shortly after that, well, quite a few years, I was working for Bolton and Yar running Arrow 71. And Pat Medill, which was the son of Sam Medill, which was the owner, Medill at the time in Klamath, was talking about making a bigger yarder. And I have a picture of it here, of the first one. It's a 171 Medill. And they came to me and asked me, they were talking about making an interlock machine. And I told them that I thought that the 5-drum little slackline was the way to go, because with the interlock machines, everyone I'd been around, the Washington 88s and 108s and 118s, they all had issues. Anyway, they listened to what I said, and they ended up making a machine similar to the one, or to the 071, but bigger. So the first one that rolled off the plant, I was going to see my sister in Portland, and it was sitting alongside the freeway there, their plant, and I took a picture of. But I never did get in one. They'd asked me what I thought, and I said, put a Wichita brake, a water-cooled brake on your haulback, your main line, and definitely on the tag line, because in them days, if you downhill yarded with a tag line would get, frying hot. You'd breathing that asbestos all day. I did it. I mean, I set the temperature gauge in that 071 in the summertime, and it'd bury it at 130 degrees by 10 o'clock. It was be buried. And
Wow.
then you're breathing all that, because you're right over the brakes.
Mm-hmm.
So they made that machine, and then I never did get in one. But shortly after that, after I talked to Pat Medill when I was running yarder over at Chimicum, he came up there and asked me all these questions. He got killed in a plane wreck. Him and his, I think it was his wife, down by Chehalis. It was a storm or something, and the loggers up by Mount St. Helens found him in the middle of the road, and by the time they got back to him, he'd bled to death.
Oh.
So that was the last time I seen Pat Medill. And so I never did get in one of those, but that's what they're using now to this day. They still have the 071 and the 171. The 071, they're pulling the engines out and putting an automatic transmission behind them, and some of them even got, Cummins. The one I ran there for Mankeys, we had put a turbo on, and it was 350 horse with the 3-stage torque converter, and I'd had just about every bolt out of those things. I had been in them, changing gears with Medill, and I remember working for Pat. He was kind of set on his ways, and I caught a Hindu hook with the haywire running out of layout and going wide open, and all of a sudden, pow, something happened, and the damn Hindu hook got hooked on the bite of the haywire going out, and it broke the hook. And 1 in a million chance, because I did this for 10 years and never had an issue, that damn hook dropped right on the bull gear.
Oh.
And when it did, it went, and it shook the whole yarder. And I told him, I says, let me go home, get my welder truck, come up with a die grinder and clean up that tooth. And Pat, stubborn, no, we're not gonna do that, run it. I ran that thing for a while, and it just shook in the bearings. I says, this is ridiculous. Finally, they could hear it out in the tail end. And then Medill come up, and we went to put gears in, and I don't know how many thousands of dollars later that was. I can't even remember, 50 grand or something at the time.
Wow.
And they're like, you could have fixed this if you'd have stopped. And I just sat there with a big grin on my face. And
Wow.
Pat knew, but stuff happens. But
Wow.
yeah, they were good little yarders. I'd done just about everything there was, because that's what you had to do. So when I would do some of the hiring and firing, and you'd get these guys, and come down from Alaska, well, I can do this, I can do that, or I can't work today. Well, they might bullshit some of those guys, that they couldn't bullshit me, because I could do it. I had a guy from Montana and driving logging truck, and he says, oh yeah, snow don't bother me, I'm from Montana. Well, when we had 3 feet of snow up Big Quill, I'd take my Honda Odyssey at night and I'd chain it up, and I'd go up there, and I knew that if I took a rope and a gallon of gas, that's all I needed. to get to that D6 cat or the 7 because I could get the pony motor going. I get the
Mhm.
pony motor going. I had it made. I'd let it warm up and then get the big motor going, and then it'd be sitting up there for a month or so, and then I'd take and pull a big motor in, let it get good and warm, and then kick it off, and I'd plow snow all night. So I might plow 8-10 miles. So in the morning, I'd call up Monday morning and get all of the trucks, and we'd hook them chain to chain. Wally had 5 trucks, hook them back to back, and I'd hook onto them with that 6 or 7 or 8, whatever it was, pull them all the way up to Sink Lake or Townsend Trailhead, and from the start of the asphalt,
Mhm.
and then chain up, and you were on your way down the mountain.
Wow.
And this one guy, well, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Yeah, let me show you how to do it, buddy. So I jump in and throw the 3 railers on and go. And the same way cutting timber, because I'd done it for so many years.
Wow.
Wind's blowing today. Wind's blowing too hard. Hey, I don't want you guys to do anything that's going to make you uncomfortable. If you don't feel comfortable, you guys go home,
Mhm.
and I'll do it. So I'd be out there cutting by myself. I did shit looking back that I should have never done.
Mm.
My wife didn't know where I was. I'd go and knock tail trees down at night because the hook tenders were too afraid to. I'd jump on my motorcycle, go up Rocky Brook where we were working. I'd be up there until in the dark, and I'd top 5, 6 tail trees in a night and have the blocks, the crew drop them off at the base of the tree for me at quitting time. Not even tell my wife where I'm going. Go up there and rig those trees. The next morning they'd be all ready to go. But
Yeah.
I used to do that stuff all of the time. So if hook tender told me, "Hey, it's too windy. I'm not going to knock the top out of that tree." When we did that job across from the state shed, wind was blowing. There was trees hitting the ground, and had a guy from down at Shelton. He says, "I don't feel comfortable doing it," and I says, "Okay, you get out. Don't do it. I don't want you to do it." And I wouldn't be mad. I'd go up there to shut down the yard, and you guys hang out tight here, and I'm going to go up there and knock the top out. And I do it, and the trees would blow, 60, 80 feet, the top would blow. So then this guy, Chip, I can't even remember his last name. He's dead now. He, "If you can do it, I can do it." And I says, "Well, I'm telling you, when you get that undercut in, you don't go very deep, but when you hit that back cut, you make damn sure you don't back out of the throttle. When it starts to go, it's like cutting alder. You do not back out. You cut. And cut it all the way off and let it blow away from you, because if you got some wood hanging up, it's going to barber chair on you, and it'll kill you." And so he got up the tree, and he put the undercut in, and then he was scared to death. "Nah, I ain't got enough balls to do it."
Wow.
So I went up there and did it. Then finally he did it. But yeah, Monty Mills was the same way. He did it for years and was no problem. Then you get a bad instance, and his spur kicked out, and "I don't want to do this no more," and then
Wow.
finally he did. But I would do as many as 7, maybe as many as 10 in a day. But I mean, I lifted weights and I was in good shape then, but I couldn't. The other day I went to go up that big sequoia, that 5-6 foot one that I cut from my brother-in-law, and I put the climbing gear on, and I got up there about 5 feet, and my goddamn spur all the rubber had rotted out of it. I haven't had them on in 20 years, and was cutting into and I didn't have my corks years ago. I had the highline corks that come up, and it was cutting into my leg, and I got up there probably 20 feet, and I'm like, I still got another 60 feet to go to where I want to go put a line in this tree, because it was next to his house, and I'm like, I can't make it. So I
Oh, wow.
got the ladder and went up the limbs.
Yeah. Wow. So, Ken, how long did you work for Wally for?
I worked 10 years,
Okay.
and then I had asked for more money, and what happened was I enjoyed doing what we were doing, but we were doing a thinning for Ben Levine up at Squim, and I walked the unit. It was, I can't remember, 80 acres or whatever it was, and I told him, I says, we'll be able to get 6 loads a day here, average. And that's a lot of wood for a thinning,
Mm-hmm.
but it was pretty nice wood. Anyway, I asked for a raise, and Wally says, "Well, I can't afford a raise." And Wally was honest. He says, "I can't afford to pay you any more money because I just bought a brand new pickup. I got it on order." And I thought, well, God damn it, if Wally can afford a new pickup, I can't keep doing this, Wally. I want to help you, but I can't keep rigging these trees. My knees are blowed out. And the guys that I have, springtime would come and they go to work for Hanley and Phillips or somebody that was paying more money, But Wally was always good. If you needed something, he'd help you out. So I said, well, I got to go to work somewhere else. So I quit, and then 3 months after I quit, I knew the guys that was logging. He'd hired a lot of the guys back that I had fired, and I wasn't into waiting for guys to get out of bed, and I wasn't into guys that would go to the bar all night and then come to work all rummy-dummy, because everybody's life there is at stake. And I says, no, I'm not gonna do it. So he hired those guys back. Some of them were my cousins. And I went to work for Bolton and Yar, and we were working up Palo Alto, and I could hear them on the CB, and I could hear them on my talkie-tooters. And they were having a hell of a time. We'd send our truck down there to the log dump, and they'd see the truck, you know, and the guy says, I've been there all day. Well, they were pulling the tail trees over, and I knew that those little tail trees were gonna have buckle guys, tree plates, because they were very small, to get the lift to get over this ridge. And they weren't doing that. And they were pulling the tail, they pulled every tail hole for miles, and then they were trying to high lead out, you know, 1,200 feet over this mountain that was blind lead, and it wasn't happening. They were getting like one load a day. So finally Wally pulled a pin and had an auction in I think it was April of '86, 3 months after I quit, you know. And then Wally, it took him a long time, and he'd come down and said, that's the biggest mistake I ever made by not giving you $1 an hour raise. His wife told me that too. Then I took Wally down to that truck show. He said, yeah, it's the biggest mistake I ever made. But, you know, what the hell, we all do that. You know, he didn't really hold a grudge, so that was good. But
Too much. So when you went and worked for Bolton and Yar, how long were you working for those guys for?
I think I worked for them for 4 years.
Okay.
And then they were working for Pope and Talbot, and what happened with Pope and Talbot was it was kind of a bid deal. Well, you're bidding against, you know, Herman Brothers. They wanted somebody that had skidders and towers, like Wally did. And then so John Bolton wasn't a tower logger, he was skidder logger for years, but he got his son-in-law, Pat, from Forks, had worked around towers, so he came down to run it, and sold his place out at Forks, and, you know, invested in the order, and whatever they did. And so I went to work for them and helped them out. And it was all good times, but, you know, Pat was kind of stubborn, you know, like me. And I told him, hey, this carriage that I built and designed will run circles around that wrapping goddamn thing you got. And we'd go through drop lines like they're going out of style. Well, some of the guys they had working would complain, so they wanted new chokers all the time, you know. So I told him, I says, I can straighten those 5/8 chokers by hand, 9/16 and 5/8. I did it for you. No way, impossible. Well, I did it, and then, you know, the guy that told me I can't do it, he'd be the first one to grab them chokers that I straightened. You know, hey, no, this is yours. This is yours. You take this old crooked one that you told me can't be done. And I did it by hand. In them days, there was a few guys that took an air can and made a choker straightener on the side of the yarder, you know. But I mean, I used to, you know, motorcycle pulling clutch all day. I'd sit in that yarder all day with one of those hand grippers to build my muscles up. So my hand was really, really strong.
Wow. So what were they yarding with, Bolton and Yar?
We had a 071 Medill.
Okay. Yeah.
And Pat was real meticulous. It was a really nice yarder, and it was quite a few years newer than the one I ran for Wally. It had it was a 3 guy line machine, not a 4, and it had no Wichita on the Skyline. Some of the later ones had Skyline Wichitas.
Okay. Now, we talked about this earlier, but recap on that story you were telling me about the Swedes that came over that were logging down the canal.
Well, I really don't, it was before my era of logging. I'm guessing it was in '65, in that era, maybe '66. My Uncle Marvin had a old 54 Peterbilt, and he had sold it and bought a almost new Peterbilt, a '66. And he was hauling for these, they call them the Swiss yodelers. These guys come from Switzerland, and they had a sled-mounted yarder, and you go up the Hamma and you look on the south side, if I remember right, south side of the river, or north side of the river. You'll see a canyon where the Hamma runs through, and on the right side and the left side, heading west toward the ocean, you'll see these long strips of timber. And if you think about it, you say, how in the hell did they log it? There's no roads. There's no road going to the landing or anything. They went up there and they cut a strip of timber, yarded that yarder. Hans, I worked with, he was from Switzerland, very fluent English, nice guy, lived at Hoodsport. He ran yarder for Halden Johnson when I worked there, but he yarded that yarder up the top of the mountain, and he lived up there. They'd send him food and groceries up in 55-gallon barrel. They took this, I don't know, I seen some of the rigging and it was huge. 2-3 inch skyline went from one mountain to the other, from the yarder clean across the canyon and tail hold it over on the other side of the mountain. It took them weeks to rig this up. Then this yarder had, on the pictures that I seen of one of these, the drum had like cooling fins on an angle which worked as thrust. So the faster that drum worked, it not only cooled the brake, but it took power, you know, the wind going in took drag. So they would downhill shotgun the turns and crash them down. There's a landing spot that I went to years ago on my motorcycle on the north side of the Hammer Road going up to Boulder Creek, and it's kind of down in the hole, but Marvin said that they would just come in 100 miles an hour and then just slap the goddamn skylight and they just crash. And nobody wearing hard hats, couldn't speak English, and they all had stocking caps on. Well, I don't know what happened or how many years or how long they worked there, but they ended up going belly up, and then the yarder was still on the mountain. And I'd heard about it as a kid, and then I'd heard about it when I got out of school and started logging, and I thought, God damn, I'd like to find that, you know, knowing that I'd never, no way you could ever get it off the top of the mountain. Well, then one time in Loggers World, I seen a picture, and I believe it was the same yarder. I never actually personally found it and went up there, because if you look at it, it's like miles to hike up to the top of that mountain. And I didn't even know where it was. So if I'd have went up one of those units and it ain't there, then it's back down and walk around somewhere else. But it was in Loggers World over at, I think, Icicle Creek at Wenatchee, above Lake Wenatchee. And I think there was a forest fire, and they were using it. They flew it out with a helicopter, took it apart in drums, and I don't know how big it was because pictures are deceiving. Yeah. And they flew it somewhere, and I don't know, trucked it, put it together, but then there was a forest fire over there, and I don't know if it got burnt up over there or what, but that was years ago. I had the magazine, but my sons had my house burnt down, and I don't know how it all burned up now.
Okay. Wow. Now, when you first started high climbing and you guys were rigging trees, what were they using for drum set or for a yarder back then?
Halden Johnson bought, we had two of them. One of them, a guy named Ed Holmes, and his son still, or was, down in Shelton logging. And it was actually it was a little triple drum, and it was mounted on an old, like a 1946, 48 maybe, GMC with a 671 that when you fired this thing up and you went up the road, you better have windshield wipers on your rig if you're even a mile back. It filled the canyon up. They could see it coming for miles. Oh. But once we got it up there and got it into position, it wasn't a bad little yarder, you know, truck mounted with a big foot on the back. And the other one that he bought was Irving Kelly's, and I think it was a BU-80 band brake and mounted on an old off-highway Kenworth, and that's what he had. And 90% of what we did up there when I was working was all shotgun logging, gravity logging, and there again, you know, we had some of the Indian guys from the scope, which was, they knew what they were doing, but it was hard to get them 2 days, 3 days a week, if that, you know. And then I'm just a naive kid, and the guy's back there shooting heroin, and I didn't even know what the hell was going on. Well, I'm checking the tail hole, you know, puking his guts out. Well, finally he didn't show up, so the boss, well, you gotta go out there and set chokers. We need logs. Well, Hans, the one that ran yarder, you know, he said, well, I don't know what you want. I couldn't hear the whistle down there in the canyon. You blow the whistle, you know. Never did it before, and what the hell's going on, you know? The carriage is above your head, you know, the size of a goddamn Mack truck, and you're like, what? Well, that ain't what I want. You blow another whistle, well, then nothing's moving. Well, by the time the whistle gets in and you're trying to do it again, and then, you know, because you can't hear, and then finally when you did get in a spot that could hear, it takes a long time to get there. Anyway, we'd get logs on the landing, and then I'd have to go up because nobody could run the loader. I had to run the loader to and then load the logging trucks when the logging truck comes. So it was a 2 or 3 man operation. And then I had
Wow.
a young kid that I went to school with, and he says, get somebody to set chokers. So I got my friend, which was a good worker, and he needed the money, and it really wasn't his fault. Went to unhook a turn, and I'm in the old shovel, and all it is basically a set of tongs.
Mm-hmm.
And we got logs 3 foot, 4 foot in diameter with bark that thick, and he couldn't get the choker undone. And not knowing what signal to give the yarder operator to pick it up and try to roll the one that he got off the top, he motioned to me, go pick it up, pick it up. Well, he's on the downhill side, and I just get this thing up in the air, and I'm trying to get, no horn, trying to get his attention. Don't do it, don't do it. And I know exactly what he's gonna do. He dives underneath the log that I got in the air
Oh.
to unhook the choker underneath. And the tongs pulled out of that bark
Oh no.
and rolled right over the top. But I don't see him. I jump out of the loader quick. I'm just, 17, scared as hell. Jump over, and I can't find him. I look over the side of the landing. He's not there. Where's Bill? Where's Bill? And I'm just panicking. Finally, I seen something moving, and he's all in rough shape. And I get him. He's conscious. Don't even know what happened. I don't even know how it rolled. Knocked him, 50 feet over the mountain. So the yarder operator dogged off the thing, gets his pickup. All we had was big Motorola's in them days, and I get a hold of the shop in Shelton, tell them, send Cold Scene ambulance up, we got a problem. So then we get him in the back of Hans's pickup, and that was an old 1964 Chevy, 3/4 ton, stiff as hell, put him in the back.
Oh no.
Bill says to this day, when I talk to him, he says he remembers every bump we hit in the road.
Oh.
We get down below the switchback at Rocky Brook. We were at the switchback. Our other yarder, the big one, has got the skyline strung out 2 miles across the canyon. The ambulance can't get underneath the skyline. So my
Oh,
cousin
no.
Mike McCone and Donnie Harris are trying to hold the skyline up. We unload Bill, put him in the ambulance, send him to, and I ride in an ambulance. We get into Port Townsend, and in them days they didn't have too good of a record. If you went there, you may not come back.
Oh wow.
We got in there, somebody got in a car wreck. They couldn't get him on the x-ray machine. Finally, we get him on the x-ray machine, and they said, there's nothing wrong with him. And I says, I just seen a 4-foot log roll over him.
Wow.
And there's nothing wrong, go home, send him home. He was living by himself, just out of high school. I says, listen, he don't have anywhere to stay. So they kept him in the hospital. Later that day, that night, he was in such pain, they put him back on the x-ray machine and found out that his pelvis was broke.
Oh my
And they were
gosh.
gonna send him home. So he healed up, and he was pretty good for quite a few years, but he's the same age as me, and I see him occasionally at a little logging show we had at Quill, and he finally retired last year, but he cut timber right up to the end, and finally he was in such pain, he said, I can't do it no more. Just quit.
Wow. And what year was that happened with
That
the-
was in 1973, I think.
Okay.
1973.
Wow.
Right where the switchback is, going up Rocky Brook.
Yeah.
Just if you're going up, just before you go around the switchback, our spur road went off to the right. Yeah, it's a UPS guy. Went off to the right, and there again, that was another incident that I had, and I knew better, but just a young kid. You were trying to shotgun, and the guy I worked for there, Holden, in them days, a lot of those hook tenders, if they didn't know how to shotgun, they didn't know how to log. So it was flat, and he wanted to get the carriage out there to get the road cleaned up. But the carriage would only go so far. Hans would suck it up to the top of the tree, slack the main line down, and then pick it up and try to put a whip in it, and it would get out there, and he still had about 200 feet to go. So Holden got this bright idea. Kenneth, you get on the skidder, a little Clark 666 that I ran, take 2 sections of hay wire, and go along the road and pull that carriage out. Well, that was fine. I did it a few turns and it worked good. Well, instead of doing what I should have did, and that's unhook once it gets to the landing, I'm backing up 100 miles an hour, and the yarder can pull faster than I can back up
Yeah.
on a skidder. And anyway, that was working out okay. Then about the 8th turn, they had a hang up because there was no lift.
Oh no.
So the junkie from down at the Skoke, the Indian guy, he blows go ahead, and turn goes ahead and hits a great big stump. dead hang up. Well, instead of slacking the skidding line and
Uh-huh.
having me pull the carriage back and unhook it and fight the hang up, he blew go ahead again. Well, finally, Hans dropped that transmission into low gear
Uh-oh.
and it pulled. And it pulled the tail hold to stump out. When it did, that shot that carriage ahead 20 times
no.
faster than I could go with in reverse. And it starts pulling me over the mountain. And I put the brakes on, hoping to break the haywire, but when it's pulling up on the back of the skidder, it don't take much, as you know, to pull a skidder, and the edge of it's right on the edge of the bank. And it started pulling me over, so I just bailed off. And when it going, and the tire got me in the shoulder, you know. Holland, I mean, lucky I never got killed. But Holland come down there. God, I can't believe you couldn't break a 7/16 section of haywire. I says, you get on this. I was mad, you know. And this guy was, you know, I'm just a kid. And this guy's, you know, like 6.5 feet tall, you know, and strong as a mule. And I'm giving him hell. No, I couldn't break it. You get on there and try to break it, you know. So it didn't hurt the skidder, just flipped it on its side right
Yeah.
there. And a few minutes later we got. Then I was running on that same job, running the scissor boom on that old American hoist and derrick. And it didn't have a stop on the main boom. So you always had to watch when you come up on the main boom. If you got up too steep, it could kick it back and go over center. And I did that once, and they had to hook onto it with the haul back and pull the boom down. Well, I had a log in there, and it's coming back, and I'm, God damn it, I only need to come back a little more. And then I got up over center and kicked back, and the wind was blowing to beat hell. And I'll never forget this. Because Hans, he spoke with a foreign accent.
Yeah.
And when it flipped over, I was swung 90 degrees to the car body. So if the tracks was here, I was swung here, and I had double counterweights on. So the boom, it sat back on the counterweight.
Oh no.
Right on the side edge of the cut bank. If that stump wasn't there, I'd have tumbled all the way down to goddamn Mount Walker. Who knows?
Oh my
And
gosh.
Hans gets out of the yarder with a big grin on his face. A pretty strong wind today to blow a shovel over. So yeah, we had, you know, I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I see the logging trucks go by, and I think about buying a logging truck or putting bunks on one of mine, and or getting a newer one. But I run into an issue, you know, 22 years of working in the union, and I get a pretty decent retirement, which I would have never got working in the woods all those years. And when I went to retire, I had to sign a paper saying that I wasn't going to get that $6,000 or $7,000 a month retirement if I took any kind of job. So I sent a letter back to him and says, listen, I never learned anything about logging or driving logging truck or pulling wrenches from you guys in Seattle. I learned this from loggers over here. If I want to do that, I should have the right. So they sent me a letter back and says, well, you can do anything that don't have anything to do with the, you know, if I went to work running an excavator or took my crane over to Seattle and started driving piling like I did for the last 20 years, that's a conflict of interest, and they could shut me off of getting my check. So I had to kind of watch what I do.
You gotta
But
be careful.
I don't think they would worry too much because there ain't too many union logging truck drivers out there.
Wouldn't think so. Yeah, you so if you did do something like that with one of your rigs, you thinking about fixing up Daryl Iverson's old truck maybe?
I don't know. I got that old 58 Model B Mac, and I thought, you know, that'd look good. Stick that big cam 400 in there and button it up, and then maybe, you know, if somebody gets alongside me and say, hey, that truck runs pretty good, I'll just tell them it ain't too bad for an old 220 or a Thermodyne, and they never tell them the difference.
Now, is that Worm used to drive that truck, but is that one of Buck Mountain's old rigs?
No. A guy named Ed Frazier had a son named Mike Frazier, and Mike Frazier bought that truck.
Okay.
But it's a B73. It's got the long hood because it's Cummins.
Oh, I see.
61 was Mack. They were shorter hoods. And I mean, I've thought about it so much that I just about get an aneurysm thinking about what I would do. I thought I'd fix the truck, and I thought, no, I just, you know, fix one of the newer trucks and just take the cab and stick the cab on the truck.
Okay.
You know, but then I don't know. I go to the truck show down there in Brooks, Oregon, and I took Wally down there, and he was just amazed. You know, there's a guy that comes up from California every year, and he's got the same color as my wife's Challenger. It's that burnt orange, and it's this truck is beautiful. It's chrome from one end to the other, and it's just like this one. So every year I go there, I'm kind of hope he ain't there, because I see that truck and then I'm like, God damn it, I want to do that. So now the issue I have is the county don't like all the junk that I got in front of the house.
Mm-hmm.
So my whole life of collecting all of this stuff to build what I want, they tell me I can't have it. And I told them, well, you know, you can dream on, buddy, because I'm going to do it. I says, I've been driving piling in Seattle alongside those big skyscrapers, and I got to know quite a few people. I did the Seahawks Stadium, you know, and Paul Allen was the owner of that, and I said, I've seen him before, and I says, I bet I could go walk up to him and he might not recognize me, but I says, I bet you I could find an attorney that would recognize me, because I've worked for those guys, you know.
Yeah.
Bill Gates is all that dirt went to the quarry over there. I says, I know a lot of people, and I got everything paid for. I don't care. I've worked my whole life. I will take every money I got to go against you guys at the county. So now last week she called and she's ready to work with me. So I don't know.
Oh, perfect.
Hopefully it'll work out.
Yeah, hopefully they get that
If I
sorted
live
with
long
you.
enough, I'd like to get the Mac restored, the Pete restored, and I haven't decided what to do with the Kenworths yet at that point in time. But I was always partial to the Kenworths because they just fit me better, and I like them A model Kenworths. You know, I mean, I drove Peterbilt, said the second on the list. Don't ask me why. I told myself 40 years ago after working on Macs and driving them that I would never have a Mac, but I bought one that had Cummins 74, and it's got the small cam 350 like my 76 Kenworth. So I bought that for parts, but then I ended up 10 years I've been working on it, and I got it just about done, and I don't even like it. But then I had to, then I bought worms, and I've got another Mac, and I got, you know, these free Macs, and I don't know.
You got Max coming out of your ears now.
I have a big Mac attack.
Oh wow! Hey, so now here's something I'm curious about. That it's a '62 Peterbilt.
Yes.
So that was Hanley and Phillips line machine truck, but where did it come?
Originally, it came from James Lumber at the hardware over at Paulsbo.
Oh wow!
They bought it new, I believe, and the neighbor Tom Monroe was from Kitsap, and he seen it, and he told me about it, and I went over and looked at it many years ago, but I didn't have the money, or it wasn't as new as what I wanted at the time. So I wasn't really that interested, so he told Hanley and Phillips, and I think Gary Phillips went over there and they bought it and used it for a line truck, but it's got a 262 in it. And my Uncle Marvin told me a story. He was pulling Mount Walker hauling to Olympia years ago, and he said he put a turbo on his 220, which kicked it up to 262. But in them days, you know, they didn't have, this was like 1960 or something. He says they had parameters, but nobody really knew what they were, so he didn't put a parameter on it. He got halfway up Mount Walker in the morning early, and the truck quit.
Oh no!
And he went and opened up that old butterfly hood and spit on the intake, and he said it was just glowing red hot.
Oh no!
So he said he let it cool, and he didn't think it'd ever go again. Pulled a compression release and fired it up, and he says it ran, and he hauled with it for a long time after that.
Holy smokes!
So I'm just trying to debate if I would yank the engine out and stick in a newer big cam. You know, I ain't into these. I drove them over in Seattle, those new computered engines. I went through Bates, and when Logan went down in 1990, and I went through, you know, Bates Technical College. Out of 130 students, I finished #1. And I could have worked for Peterbilt. Caterpillar wanted me to go to work, but I told myself I wasn't going to work in Seattle. And then there I is, you know, running a crane in Seattle
years
for 22
later.
years. But
did you, after you got out of Bates, is that when you went straight over to Seattle and worked over there for?
No, after Bates, I quit. I quit Bates. 2 reasons. The kids were young. I went through the first year, and the second year, you were basically fixing people's rigs that came in there, which I was already doing. But the reason I quit was the state was running out of money, and they cut my gas money off. So I was driving every day from Quilcene, which is 85 miles, you know, and I did it on a motorcycle until I froze out. And then I bought a little Hyundai car, and it was working out, but then they kept kicking out the money. And every time they would threaten to shut my money off, this guy told me, he says, this is the secret. He says, you go in there and wait till a counselor comes in, and you start kicking a garbage can and having a fit. Well, me being I got Irish blood, it didn't take much to set me off, and I'd go over there. That's it, I'm done. Well, the instructor liked me because when he was gone, he would have me, you know, Ken Ackerman's going to show you how to time a Cummins and whatever. That was no problem because I'd worked on logging trucks for years. So that was good, but he didn't want to lose me. So he would go to the president of the college and then get more money, and they'd take up a little ante and they'd pay me. Well, Pope and Talbot needed a truck driver, so I went and put in for it. And we drove the Pope and Talbot self-loader, which was new in 1989, and that was in 92. And I hauled for them until they folded up. And then after they folded up, there again, everybody that I'd worked for had me come back one way or the other. They hired me directly to help pull the mill apart. So then I went to work for Chuck Mankey. Chuck Mankey bought that great big huge lumber sorter that was in the mill at Gamble, and hired me, and then I hired my dad to help me. And it was like 90 feet long. It had 8-inch or 10-inch channel iron every 4 feet, which was like 26 feet tall, if I remember right, and it was like 50 feet wide, so it was as big as this house, or bigger.
Wow.
And I went over there and I cut each one of those off and took a 20-ton bottle jack. It took me about a week, and I jack it up a 1/4 inch at a time, and I had to go so I didn't warp it and twist it. And Chuck Mankey bought this because when he went to the auction, when he was over there looking, he had 3 guys tell him it was impossible to do what he wanted to do. He wanted to put it on a barge, take it to his plant, his mill in Tacoma. And they said it's impossible. That has to come apart because these guys had taken that apart. One was from China, one was from Brazil, one was from Australia. These big guys that go around to these auctions, they said they followed this stuff around for 50 years. So we did the way Chuck wanted, got it up in the air, and that thing sat there over the weekend, and that was in 92, and I think it was 93. And then that earthquake hit, and we had a little earthquake, and I was scared to death because I had it blocked. I mean, I had sawmilled blocking that I'd taken over, and God damn it, it's going to be in the bay. But it didn't move. He bought big channel irons, and I welded those on, let it back down, and then he also bought the log stacker that I ran at the Port Ludlow mill at the end. I was the last one before the mill went. I was the one that locked the gate. And he hooked onto it when I wasn't there and towed it out on the loading ramp, and had his son, Joe Mankey, come down from Alaska with the big tug, put the barge in position. And everybody, including me, had told him. They told him, the guys at Pope and Talbot said, we haven't used that dock for 30 years because it's rotted out underneath. Don't do it. Well, Chuck, pretty smart guy, he goes under there and looks, I think it'll be fine, I think it'll be fine. He jumped in that log stacker by himself with nobody around, hooked onto that stacker, pulled it out there, that lumber sorter, pulled it out there, got on the decking over the bay, and that big Kenworth dart broke through.
Oh no.
Down it went. And then I come home at night. I don't know where I was working. I think he had me working over here at the Quilcene log dump. He bought the log dump, and the county was giving him hell and shut him down. And I get this phone call. What are you going to do about that log stacker? What are you talking about, log stacker? Yeah, it's leaking oil and diesel in the bay. Well, when it broke through, it was on such an angle, a 90 weight was coming out the front planetary, and diesel was coming out the fuel tank, and Chuck panicked. He jumped in his airplane, which is there, a seaplane, and headed to Alaska. So they're calling me. So I had to call Moose, the mechanic at Shelton. They come up. I wasn't there, and they went out there, and they said it was a mess because they had to find something strong enough on that deck to jack to and to raise it up in the air. And they worked their ass off and got it up in the air. And then Chuck got some big heavy planks and took and pushed that thing out, put it on the barge, and took it to Tacoma, and it's still down there. In fact, I haven't been down there in years, and I went down there and took a load of scrap last week, looked at it, and he's still using it.
Doggone, isn't that something else? Now, when you worked for Chuck Mankey, you're working as a logger for him too at one point, right?
I did anything and everything there was. We started out, I was going to be the side rod for the 071 Medill. And Carl Miller from Hoodsport was doing it, and I went down to Toledo. We picked it up, and I'd worked with Carl before, and Carl was very smart, very good hook tender, very good, very smart guy, but he had some personal drinking or drug problems, and you know, Chuck didn't want to deal with it anymore, so he wanted me. And I told Carl, I says, hey, I've worked with you, I'd rather work with you than against you. And Carl was good. We took and rigged it up. I can't remember, I was at Hoodsport, I was at Quill, I was at Port Angeles, and then he had me when it was in between jobs. He bought out at Thousand Trails out at Coyle. There again, they knew what to do, you know. he offered when they were going broke to buy it for, somebody said, I can't remember, $2 million, land and timber. And they says, oh, no, we gotta have more than that. Well, he just waited till they lost stocks
Oh,
and the interest kept going down. He ended up getting it for like $750,000.
wow.
Sold the timber. I mean, this was old growth. I remember dumping some 5-foot firs that were just nice, beautiful. You know, they had a pitch seam in them, but they were just beautiful. And he ended up selling the timber for like $750,000. Then he sold the land for like $1 million or something. I can't
Yeah.
remember what the numbers was, but it was very, very high. So he ended up coming out way like 3 times more than what he paid for it.
Wow.
You know, so I cut timber, build roads, drive dump truck, then had me hauling logs, and I hauled from Port Angeles at Deer Park to Tacoma. I remember one time going down there with a load and hot summer, and had a 3-axle trailer. That's the first time only time I'd ever monkeyed with the 3-axle trailer. You know, no drop axle on the truck. 8V92 Jimmy, you know, so I'm wound up against Governor at Port Orchard, and I'm pulling that hill. And all of a sudden the truck shakes and there's an explosion. Well, I blew a tire on the back driver. So, hell, I'm gonna limper on into Tacoma on one, done this for years. And, you know, hope like hell the other one don't blow or the rear end's gonna drop. Been there, done that. So I made it to Tacoma and I come back and I see a wrecker right where the tire was. My tire's still out in the middle of the road. That tire cap went right through that Blazer's radiator, and there was antifreeze everywhere.
Oh,
I felt
no.
bad, and but there's nothing I could do. It's on the other side of the freeway, you know. and
Wow.
Hope like hell nobody obviously got hurt, but it had a wrecker there hooking onto him. So.
Wow. So it went across the other side of the
No,
freeway.
he was right behind me.
Oh, okay.
But
yeah.
when I
yeah.
come back, I was in the other lane, you know, and I
Yeah.
can't do that.
Yeah,
Then when I
okay.
was hauling for Pope and Talbot, right at Bremerton where you go to Chico, I blew a tire and it took the mud flap. You know how you got the
Yeah.
spring mud flaps, Peerless? It took that, and I watched this guy was passing me. It went across the top of his car, missed his car, and went like that across 2 lanes of traffic, woof, 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 and landed in the median.
Oh no.
Well, when I come back, I need my mud flap for tomorrow because I
Yeah.
got to go to Port Angeles and Rhodes. I don't want him to give me a ticket.
Yeah.
So I tried to stop, but there was cars on my ass. So I called Steve Wistrand on the big radio. Says, "Hey, would you go pick that?" No. So the next morning when I'm going to Tacoma, I picked it up and put it on there. And then come home at night. You know the story: stretch the spring out,
Yeah,
put them
yeah.
on it, put them on.
Gosh.
Yeah,
That
that
is-
was a good days.
So now, in between there somewhere and all this, you worked for Dave Soderlund too.
Oh yeah.
So what year was that?
I think it was 89 to 92 when he was working and we went done with the unit. We was working over at Green Mountain at Bremerton where the Channel 13 radio tower is.
Yeah.
When that job was done, he had no more to go, so that's when the timber training was going. So I got into
Okay.
the timber training, and then I went. So it might have been 1990, 91. We bought that. We went down to Totem Equipment in Portland, and he rented for the first 6 months or a year that 200 Hitachi
Hitachi.
that you seen,
Yeah.
and it was nice new. I put 8,000 hours on that in 2 years. I mean, I ran that thing day and night, and I logged at night in wintertime up at Squim, shovel logged all night hours of the day, and it was a very, very good machine. But the cab was down low, and if you see the pictures I got here now, I took and made an attachment and welded a bracket and took a long bottle jack and raised the cab, and then I put these in there, and I just hooked the air wrench to the logging truck and then just bolt, you know, 1/2-inch
Yeah.
bolts and put the bracket in, because you couldn't see when you were loading pulpwood, you know, you were down
Yeah.
here like that and the load's up here and you're right behind it because it's short boomed, you know. I mean, after running that 666 coring where I could reach the crab guard and then jumping in that little machine and you couldn't see, it was kind of tough. But
So now, when you were for people that don't know that, you're talking about the timber that timber program earlier. After you were done with Dave and there wasn't anywhere else to go, you went into the timber training.
timber training, I went and could have took my choice. You know, they said that obviously you can't take, and because you're a logger, you can't take and become a brain surgeon. You had to do something that was in your
Category.
category. So you had to take this aptitude test, which, you know, I hated high school and I just was glad to get out. and they had me taking these tests, so the computer kicked out. You know what I should have been? You'd never guess. I tell people, listen, they laugh. I should have been a florist.
A florist.
Yeah, I mean,
No
hell, I was
kidding.
noted to be a burly logger, and all of a sudden they want me to be a goddamn florist. And I'm like, what? And they said, that's what, because you were around trees, and trees are plants.
Oh, yeah.
The computer says you should be a florist. I laughed. I said,
The
no.
doggonest thing.
You're nuts. So I went to Port Angeles, looked at their program at Olympic College, and then I went down to Tacoma, and what a difference, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
Port Angeles had like, I think, a 335 Cummins and maybe a 471 Jimmy to run a rack on, and that was it. And you go down to Tacoma, and it's like 3 times the size of our gymnasium, and it was one big row of Cummins, one big row of John Deere, one big row of Caterpillars. So I said, this is where I want to be. And I got down there, and I was really, really discouraged, because I grew up with the guys that wanted to go fast up a hill with a truck, and I didn't really know how to do it. But I knew nothing about buttoning up a truck. I mean, I knew if you put a bigger, change the button, go a smaller number, you're going to get more power. But there's also, to do it correctly without melting the pistons, you need to do the timing. And not many guys knew how to do the timing. Well, I'd read books, but I'm kind of a hands-on person. I have to have somebody show me. So I learned from this old guy, Lyle Linton, at Brennan, down at working with my uncle at Shelton, you know, but I couldn't remember. It was years ago. And you have to have the Cummins dial indicator, which is about $875 off the Snap-on truck, which I could never afford. Wally had one, and he had Dave Ellis doing the work, but I never really got involved in that. But when I got to Bates, I got to use all of that stuff. But I wanted to make those engines pull really good, because George Slack and all those guys, you know, they'd all button them up, but then pretty quick they're working on them at night because the pistons are melted down. So I wanted to be able to have it run and pull Mount Walker and not worry about the parameter getting over 1400 or 1200 degrees, you know, and do it all day. So when I went down there, they wouldn't show me none of that, because they didn't know. They didn't have a clue. If it's anything to do fuel related from this fuel pump on, it has to go to, you know, the fuel pump place. They had a flow bench, but it's like any of those colleges, and my son teaches over at every community college, it's the same thing. All of the stuff kids have taken through the years, and the parts aren't there. The flow bench didn't have half the stuff. So, you know, years ago, in the old days, you lapped your fuel pumps and your injectors. You had a lapping stone, and you figure eighted it with grinding compound. They wouldn't show you how to do none of that, because it did you no good. You had to take it there. And the instructor didn't know. The instructor and me didn't see eye to eye, because he wasn't really a diesel mechanic. He was retired from the Air Force. He worked on jet engines. Because it was a jet engine, he got, you know, the number one application that the person looked at, so he gets the job, but he didn't know shit. You know, I want to run a rack on this 671. Oh, nobody uses Jimmys anymore. Maybe not over here in the city, they're not in trucks, but where I come from, every yarder, Alice Chalmers bulldozer has got, you know, all this equipment that I own has got Jimmys, and I went mainly to learn for myself. But when I finished so high, they give me a job offer, and it pissed everybody off there. They go, well, Ken, being you're the number one student here, we have a job, and it's for this outfit that has these big yachts, and you go all over the world. You go to Australia, we will give you, you're the master mechanic, and you have to help the crew. You have to serve hors d'oeuvres, because there's only 4 of you, the captain, and I'm like, no, I'm not interested. We'll fly your family in. If you go to Acapulco, when that goes, because they rent them out to these doctors and lawyers, multimillionaires, and I'm like, no, you never see me. I hate boats. I hate the water. I'd rather lay underneath a D8 cat out in the woods and downpour rain with 2 feet of mud and weld on it, or work and pull a crank out of it than sit there. And it was going to pay, and at that time it was a lot of money. It would have paid me in 1992 $60,000. My wife, my kids, my family is flew in, and I have a corporate card to buy whatever I need for the, and they're going, no, you're nuts, Ackerman, do it. And I'm going, I don't want it. So they had to give it to the second down the list. His name was Peter. He was from Moscow, Russia. Couldn't speak English. Very smart, but crazy bastards. They take didn't have any electronic fluke meters, so when they wanted to they'd take their fingers, take the spark plug wires off and stick them on the spark plugs and short it out to where the engine stopped. I took a magneto down there off my sawmill that had 40,000 volts. You'd
Wow.
throw a spark like that for every quarter inch, it's 50,000 volts. And it would burn a newspaper in half. These Russians was lining up, almost punching one another to flip that magneto and stick their finger in it and make their hair stand up. My instructor looked at me and he says, these guys are something else.
Oh, wow. What a trip. That's too funny. So now, Ken, I'm curious about this. Out of all the people you've worked with, because you've worked for these outfits around the Quilcene area and Shelton and whatnot, and you've worked with dozens of people. But if you even got a handful or one or two people that you'd say was the biggest character you worked with, who would come to mind?
Biggest character would have probably been my cousin Mike McCone or Tommy Boyd.
Okay.
Those two guys.
And now I've worked with guys that worked with Mike McCone when he worked for Pete Anderson.
Yeah.
And now that would have been probably early mid 90s when Anderson was still logging, huh?
I'm gonna say that if Mike worked for Pete Anderson, it probably would have been in the 80s.
Okay.
I'm guessing. Mike was a very hard worker, and he'd do anything you said. And we worked fairly good together as a team because he didn't know what to do. So he'd come up in the yard and ask me, "Okay, Ken, I'm going to go ahead and rig this tree over here and put the hull back here or whatever." And I'd say, "Do whatever you want. Keep that waistline in the air," because I could get 3-4 years out of the hull back where the average guy would get 2. So Mike would listen to me and he would do what I'd ask. I get them hook tenders from Alaska that would come down in the winter this time of the year. They used to ground leading, and the whole back would be burning through the damn stumps, and it'd be a mess. But Mike would try very hard, and his brother was the same way. But Mike had been around a lot longer. Joey didn't know.
Okay.
Mike knew. Mike could top a tree, and you give somebody credit. His dad got killed. My uncle Joe got killed topping a tree. So here his son is basically living by himself after his dad died, and you'd think that somebody that went through that wouldn't even want to have anything to do with a tree.
Yeah.
But he went out there and he learned and he topped trees. We'd make a lot of money on weekends topping at these, Duck Bush Development, Olympic Canal tracks, Lazy Sea. That's where Joe McCone got killed on the Lazy Sea there for Bill
Really?
Clark. Yeah, 1968, I believe it was.
Really? And how the heck did that happen?
Well, there's lots of controversy to that. There was another guy that was on the ground helping him, and you know the guy. I'll tell you after the video. Anyway, he fell a tree. And the story was, and I was just a kid, I really don't know, but the relatives that went down there that knew what was going on said it looked like the evidence was that Joe was in a tree and the other guy was falling a tree and accidentally
Brushed him.
and hit him, and it killed him. But, we also know that my Uncle Joe had a tendency, like Mike, to do stuff dangerous. It might have been too blowy. It was a stormy day. I can remember when my sister told me that Joe, our uncle, got killed. It was kind of a stormy day. The wind could have been, and I think it was an alder or a maple, and they're barber chair if you don't know what you're doing. And Joe had done enough of them, but stuff happens no matter who you are. So, we really, really don't know. But
Huh. Now, did Mike work with you at Peterson's?
Yes.
Okay.
I've worked with him for Holden Johnson, Wally Peterson, Bolton and Yar, Dave Soderman.
Okay.
I remember it was wintertime, cold as hell, and was over there at Green Mountain at Bremerton, and we was yarding, and Mike was, I was running loader, and Mike was chasing on the landing, bucking, and we were yarding tree length, and Mike was bucking, and he couldn't really, as many years as he worked in the woods, he'd try, but he couldn't file a saw. So he'd bring the saw to me if I was running yard or in between turns, I'd file or whatever. And, oh, God damn, it cuts good now, Or he'd take a file and try to file the riders off, and then if I had to top a tree, you got that bar right here.
Oh, no.
And it's just about ready to cut you, I mean,
Yeah.
the only time I ever got cut with a chainsaw was because his brother, Joey, took the riders down on one, and I had to notch a guy line stump in a tight spot, and the goddamn thing kicked back and got my leg right here, and I had to go to Shelton and get, like
Oh, no.
15 stitches in my leg. And I told him from that point, you don't touch my saw. This is my saw. This saw right here. Do not touch the saw. In them days, if I was doing big trees, I topped a big white fir or hemlock up Washington Pass,
Mm-hmm.
Hawkshaven up there. I think it was about close to 3 feet at 90. The biggest tree was over 5 foot on the butt at 90 feet, and I still had 60 feet of tree going by me. And
Wow.
I use that 075 still, and that was a long time ago. But if you try to start a 075 still without a compression release, because when you'd be cutting timber, those compression releases would be hot, and they'd get hot and they'd unscrew,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you'd have a fire over here.
Oh,
So
no.
I had it plugged. So when I was in the tree, if I was in the climbing gear, I had to take and put it behind my back and get it going. And I could get it going, and if I had a ground guy, I'd have him, Mike was always good. Start that 075, let it idle, put it on the rope. Well, I got up there one time, and I'm topping a tree, and Wally Peterson, it was for Wally, and Wally was there, and Mike was there. And I was up the tree, and I hated McCullough's with a passion. And his number one man, Dick Borden, everybody knows, great guy, but funny as hell, he was a McCullough guy. And this was before Wally got changed to Sills. And he gave me this goddamn Pro 80 McCullough to top the tree. And I'm up there in the tree, and it won't start. Finally, Mike McCone gets the damn thing going on the ground for me and sends it up, and I pull it up on the pass rope. And I'm cutting and I'm limbing, and all of a sudden, I cut my little pass rope off that I have it tied to.
no.
I got a little short one, that it
Yeah.
hangs off of. And I'm up there probably, it was a pretty good sized tail tree. I think I was up there 90 feet, 85 feet. And I'm used to just letting the saw go.
Mm-hmm.
So the saw's running, and I let it go. That goddamn rope was sawed off, and it went whoosh.
Oh,
The
no.
bar stuck in the ground, and it's still running right alongside of them. So they're all down there laughing because they seen it,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm mad. So I'm like working my ass off up there, and I says, "There, that'll teach you. That's what I think of those goddamn." And I didn't do it on purpose, There, now you get me a goddamn saw that'll run that I can shut off when I want to shut it off and wander myself up the tree without, because they didn't have chain brakes in them years, You're
right.
going up there and idling,
And chain still spinning, yeah.
800 RPM instead of 500 RPM, and the damn chain's going, and then your pass rope is right there, and it's hitting it, it's nicking it, and wrapping it up in the bar and getting bound up,
gosh.
Didn't take long after that, I got the first 045. That was in like 77 or 8.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome. What a great story.
Yeah, Mike McCone used to tell me that story last day I seen my cousin in the rest home, and I told him I wouldn't ever let nobody smoke in the crew bus. I hate them goddamn cigarettes with a passion, and I wouldn't let him smoke. And we were going up Rocky Brook, and Big Quill, got up there where the rock wall is, where the heliport is, and the pickup's sliding backwards. And it's sheer cliff on this side. And Mike McCone remembered very well because there was a guy, Inc., he was a rabbit farmer here, and that's where he went to cut a Christmas tree, they figure, and they haven't found him for a year or two, and finally somebody on the other side of the mountain seen a reflection, and they sent somebody over there, and the car was way down the bottom of that cliff by the
Wow.
heliport up there going up Big Quill. So Mike McCone was real nervous, and I'm going up this hill sliding backwards. There's about so much snow, and it's solid ice underneath, and he gets out of the rig, and I go to start the rig, and it dies, and the battery's dead. Typical Wally rig, the battery's dead. We had one rig for 6 rigs. That's a whole other story.
Yeah.
One battery for 6 rigs, and I ain't kidding. We only had to take the battery out of the crew bus to work the whistles. And then at quitting time,
no.
quitting time to go home, you had to put it back in the crew bus. But if you needed the skidder or the cat, that was your battery. Anyway, Mike McCone, he's all nervous as hell. I says, it won't start. The only way we're going to get this thing going, guys, is I'll hit the starter at the same time, and I'll compression start it in reverse. But I'm on ice. So to keep me from going over the hill, I've got to swing this thing around. I'm going to hit the brakes. On the front brakes are disc, and they'll lock up before the back, and the front end of that Ford crew bus is going to swing around, and you guys are going to help it and push. But you got to hold me straight while I get it going. Mike McCody's so dumb. I don't give a shit. You fire me. I'm smoking a goddamn cigarette. So he light up the cigarette. But yeah, he was quite a character.
Oh, gosh. And how long do you figure he worked for Peterson for?
Oh, he worked on and off. I fired Mike more than once. He'd find these girls, you know, or he'd go drinking and go on these rendezvous and then call me up from Acapulco. Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't make it. I'm down here in Mexico or in Hawaii or whatever, you know. And I fired him more than once, but he'd worked back and forth. But he'd worked just about every logging camp in Alaska. He'd been all over the place, you know. I mean, it just,
Yeah.
you know, that was his life. That's all he did. Probably one of the smarter ones on logging that really knew what to do was the guy I was telling you, Carl Miller from Hoodsport. He has, you know, had him and Mike ran around together, so
Okay.
that explains it. You know, I mean, he'd go out and party with Mike quite a bit. I mean, he was more of a loner, but he'd been around
Yeah.
the Skagits, the Burgers. He's been around them all. Mike told me a story that they were rigging up a tower out at Aberdeen. I can't remember who it was for. It was a big slack line, T110, and they got the tower up. And Carl went to go up on a guy line and sucking it up a little bit more, straightening the tower up. And dogs was all wore out on the dogs that
Oh,
hold
no.
it in. And she started going back, and Mike McCone knew the sound. He just go faster and
no.
faster and faster. Anybody else, Mike said he took off on a dead run. And Carl stayed right with it. He stayed right with it, and he, you know, friction in and tried to go up, and he got the goddamn thing before she went to the ground.
Wow.
He said things was getting real heated. But yeah,
Oh,
Carl
wow.
was, in his younger years, was really, really, you know, good, because him and me were one of the only ones. He hooked for mankeys for years, and he was one of the only ones that wasn't afraid to get up a tree and knock the top out of him and get lift, you know. And he worked his ass off, and he knew, you know, he knew what was going on. But
Wow. Now, how about Tommy Boyd? Now, I imagine since, you know, there's so many outfits that were around here back in the day. Did he kind of bounce around too to different logging outfits, or?
not too many logging outfits. He basically stayed in the quill scene area that I remember.
Okay.
You know, I worked with him a lot, and when Tommy had his act together,
Mm-hmm.
he was good. He was good on the landing, and that's kind of where I started out on the rigging, you know, and then moved to the landing, because they always wanted me on the landing because 90% of the stuff wouldn't start and I could get it going, because
Yeah.
my dad had junk, you know, so I knew how to jump a solenoid or whatever it took to get it going. So I started on the landing, and a lot of guys didn't want nothing to do with the landing, and that's why I'm deaf now. You know, years of running yarder and being on the landing and running chainsaws all day. But even cutting timber, I wouldn't wear earplugs because I wanted to hear the tree, especially if you're cutting alder, you know.
Yeah, okay.
When it starts to snap or anything. If there's a limb coming down, you know, you might hear it before it hits you. But yeah, it's just a whole nother deal now. You know, I've run buncher and cut timber with bunchers, and that's a good deal. I mean, like this house, I didn't have money to build a house. Every single stick in this house, I fell, buck, yarded, trucked, sawmilled, and planed. I can
Really?
tell you where this wood come from. This was Alaska cedar. This come off of Merhut. You know the big sign in front of Wally Peterson's shop that says
Yeah.
Peterson Logging? That came from Merhut. This is part of a tree right next to it. This here, that's old growth fir. I fell that up on, that was the biggest tree I ever fell, 8'6", on the stump, right in front of the 10-mile shelter on Big Quill. And
Really?
that was a hollow log. It was just a shell that big on the butt. And everybody said, you'll never get it down, you'll get killed. I got that down, and then, yeah, the trim on that window, that's all 600-year-old tree. All that trim is, I didn't have money to buy stuff, and I just made what I had at the time, and I ain't a carpenter, I ain't smart. I just said, well, this is what I gotta do. Right above my head, when I started building this, they said, well, you gotta have a engineer come in because you can't use your own lumber. And I says, well,
Oh.
let me tell you something. I worked for Pulp and Talbot. I just drove self-loader, but I didn't tell him that. I says, I forgot more about stress grading lumber than you'll ever know. I said, he says, well, what are you gonna do here? I had this house designed for trusses. I had the trusses all ordered, And then in the wintertime, the price went down, and I called him in the spring, and I says, I'm ready to get my trusses. Oh, we didn't build them yet. Not only did we build them, but the price went from $2,300 to $4,000.
Oh gosh.
I says, well, you guys are pulling somebody's leg because the price of timber has dropped. Well, that's what the price is, want it or take it. I said, no, that's it. So I designed my own, and I built my own, I stick framed it. But in order to make a joint in the middle, because this house is 32 feet long, I had to have something here. So I put a great big beam in here, but the engineers said, oh, you gotta have it engineered. I says, well, how do you know? Well, I says, you got your license? And he started spitting and sputtering. I says, how can you tell me that it's too small of a beam if you don't know? You can't tell me it's too small, can you? Well, no. So he went back all mad, and I'm out here, and I thought, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? So I fired up the sawmill, being I could mill 28 feet. This room was 28 or 30 feet. I took the sawmill, and I took a log about like yay, and I just squared the log.
Oh yeah.
And then I put it up there, took my crane, and I set it up here on top of there. And he come out, and he looked at that, and looked, and shook his head. And I was just waiting for him to say, have you got that engineered? He didn't say a word. And it's been in here, since '97, and hasn't fell down yet. I don't know, one of these days there'll be an earthquake and probably land on my head. But,
oh, too stinking cool. That's awesome. Oh,
yeah,
and
you had to do all kinds of stuff in them days. We had a fire truck for Wally Peterson. I was telling my son Michael the other day, and he got a kick out of it. We were up at Squim, and we come over the mountains because we didn't want to truck all this stuff. So I drove it over. I didn't drive it. One of my workers drove the truck. It was an old 1940, I think it was a 41 or 46 International with a green diamond flathead International engine. And coming over Bon John Pass, he didn't check the oil before he go, and the thing got hot and seized up, blew up, knocked the bearing. I can't remember. Anyway, pulled the engine out, and Wally, yeah, I know where there's an engine. We're gonna go get the engine. So I went to the wrecking yard and got the engine. Well, the engine sat in the shop, and then hell, I didn't have time to put it in. We towed that goddamn fire truck from job to job for the whole year. And Pete Blanchard was the Forest Service guy, and he'd come up there in the summertime, oh, I need to test your fire equipment. We'd laugh, oh, Sean Loring, he was a good one, oh God, we're Ken's in the yard, or we got trucks coming, God, can you do it tomorrow? Well, then he'd come up the next day, and it'd be downpour raining, and then, oh, you don't need to check it today. We lucked out for a year, and he never opened the hood once, and there wasn't even an engine in it.
Oh my gosh. I didn't realize that Sean worked for Wally Peterson.
Actually, I broke Sean in, and me, I wasn't big into them drug heads or drinking, so he was working, we were doing that downhill job in 1980, and he just came up there for Wally, and I broke him in setting chokers, and believe it or not, he ended up being one of the best workers that I had. He was a hard worker, but he had his issues, too, but he was usually pretty dependable, and I felt sorry for him, he just had a little kid there about the same age as my kids, and he was working out of Coyle where Wally's property is, and it was Big Alder. And he wanted to work, and I said, well, I'm out there by myself cutting. I says, come on out, you can help me. Oh yeah, I can cut. Okay, so he got out there and started cutting, and if you know anything about big lean and alders, you have to do what's called a clover leaf, put an undercut in and cut on each side, and then leave a strip, and because in them days we only had little 041 stilts, and they had 404 chains, which was too much for them with 36-inch bars for limit on the landing, and you didn't have enough power. And when they started to go, you better stay with it, or they're going to barber chair and you're going to get killed. Well, he'd seen me cut him, and I'd cut there all day, and he looked and he didn't have no problem. Then he tried it, and pretty quick, bam, that damn sharp barber 40 feet up, whoosh, shooting alongside, and he stuck with it, after about 2 or 3 hours, and probably half a dozen trees looked like alligators out there all split, and he come up there where I was cutting on my strip, and he says, I'm ready to lose my house. I need to work, but that last one scared the hell out of me, and this is all that's left of my saw.
Oh no.
And I says, okay, Sean, you can pack jugs for me and pound wedgers or whatever. So, but yeah, he was a really good worker.
Huh.
When he started, when I went to work for Yar, him and DeEtte Broderson's kid were setting chokers. Mark Broderson, and he was up at Squim. and Walter Beck had ran the yarder, but Walter and Diet got into confrontation or something, so Diet called me and wanted to know if I wanted to go to work. So I go up there, and we're up there at Palo Alto, and it's second growth. And a lot of it, they just left the tops in.
Okay.
And a little dog here. And Sean told Mark, he says, what are you doing? Sean was out clear, and Mark had the whistle, because he wanted to be a rigging slinger. So you better get in the clear. This ain't Walter Beck running the yarder. Before that last whistle gets in, Ken hears 3, he's going to be on the throttle, friction's in. So, I'd sit in the yarder, you ran them all day, friction's in, foot's on the brake, I'm just waiting, because I'm bored. Second I get that third whistle, that's going, and I'm watching drums, and pretty quick, beep, stop, what the hell's that? What are we stopping for? Well, I look, and Mark's upside down because he's still on the end of the turn, and they're going. He says, I told you, God damn, He says, when you see me clear out, you stay behind me. So they were getting like 2 loads a day, and then the first day I started, I think we got, in that dog hair, 6 or 8, and the landing was plugged, and Dick Nodell couldn't keep up, So I told Pat, I says, I probably shouldn't tell you this. I says, this is what I would do. Well, what's that? And I says, I just slack the guy line, move the yarder. I says, I don't need to move the tail end. I says, I'm not side blocking that tree enough. I says, I'll just move the yarder over 50 feet. Let Dick get those logs whenever. I don't care. That's up to you. It's your outfit. Do what you want. So I'd slack the guy line, move the yarder over, and just kept yarding. And about the time he'd get that landing cleaned up or that pile, I'd be, on another pile up the top of the tower till it got unsafe to unhook the turns and move again, Well, then they started seeing what I did all the time, and I says, you need to swing guy lines, Diet. I says, and I told Pat more than once, I says, I ran that one in Wally's for 10 years. I says, after 5 years, these guy lines are stretched, and you'll break them at the shib. I've done it. I've saved the tower every time, but I says, you'll break it at the shib. Well, he's over there at Chimacum yarding long ways, and there again, I told him, I says, you need to change the guy line Diet right off the bat, because he was hook tender, he was a side rod, and I didn't want to cause confrontation. And I knew better, and then I blew go ahead. And I was pulling, and shit's getting tight, and I'm looking at that guy line stump out the back window, and stuff's springing in the tracks on the spring M32 Sherman tank, and I told him, I says, this ain't good. I blew stop. And usually when I don't blow stop. When I blow stop, that means I'm pulling to my capacity. Mark gets on the radio. It's coming. It's almost there. It's almost there. Just pull a little harder. And I knew better. And I told the chaser, Jeff Elite, I says, get out of the way. And I give her a little more throttle, and pow, that goddamn thing went down. Well, what I've usually done is, I was holding the skyline with my foot, because your foot will react quicker than all your hands. And I started kicking brakes off, frictions off, let off, but it was too late. It broke the static guy line on the back, and the tower came down right along the cab, folded the guy lines over the top of the cab, brought the cab over the top of me, and put my hand in between the cab, and I had a big lump for years here, and I did x-rays, couldn't figure it out. Well, it was glass in there. Glass don't show up the x-ray. But I pulled my hand out, and the yarder went over. The hoist, the tube went down across. I had a rack over the front for landing logs, and it picked the back track up. You could have walked over, and then I couldn't shut it off because it was sucking oil out of the crankcase. So I ran down quick and flipped the emergency flipper on the blower and got it off. And then they had to deal with it while I went to the hospital. But that's the only time in all the years of running equipment that I had a instance. And I never wrecked a logging truck, and I remember over here at East Quill, I had that TD-25, and the guy had it right on the side of the mountain ready to flip over. One track was completely off the ground, and then he went off, bailed off. And they're like, what are we gonna do? Oh, let's go get Ackerman. He'll get it out. So I got it out of there.
Wow.
I used to live for the adrenaline rush. What nobody else would do, I would do, but I would only do it if I didn't want nobody else to get hurt. I do it myself. You get out of there, I'll do this. Same way running crane over there. All those guys, they're calling me back to this day. We can't find anybody that'll run the crane as fast as you would and get the stuff done. I was picking up 120,000 pound beams and putting them on that overpass, crane on each end, walking them in, and the foreman was real meticulous. God damn it, when I want an inch, I want an inch. Oh, yeah. Well, they had all these other guys, and they'd say, come down an inch, and they'd come down 6 inches. and then he'd have a bar up against a 120,000-pound beam trying to put it in place,
Yeah.
and that bar would kick the shoulder, and he's standing up there 20 feet in the air. That's how that one guy got killed, right alongside of us. I remember the day it happened, same thing, you know, the guy tried to come down with the crane, and it kicked that beam, and then it threw him off center, and he
Oh.
went down. When he went down, they had these steel casings where we put down, there's 6 or 8 foot caisson piling and our pipe, and they didn't cut it off. That was sticking up, and when the guy
Oh.
went down, it hit his head. The same age as me, worked his whole life, just bought a house or building a log house in Idaho, and cracked his skull open and
Oh,
killed him.
wow.
Had 4 days left before he retired, or a week left. Him and his wife was going to move, and killed him.
Gosh. Yeah, that's a horrible thing.
Yeah, investigations went on. They came over and looked at my rig and looked at my crane, and I was ready to, you know, just say I don't want to deal with this shit.
Yeah.
Pull the pin, you know. I mean, after
Wow.
all the years, I didn't have him kill nobody. I don't want to, you know, worry about what happened over there. And then you had watchmen's watching. You know, you got a watchman over here and a watchman over here, and they're all for L&I, and they're watching you. And one thing, you know, you're getting nervous, you know, and finally I just had to close my eyes, you know, and what do you want, you know, and the guy would come over the radio, okay, you know, boom down, whatever, you know, and
Yeah. Gosh. Yep, couldn't handle it. Well, I want to take a look at some of these photos you got too before.
yeah. Okay, that picture there is downhill yarding with that carriage that I redesigned, and that is straight across from the state sheds on Mount Walker.
Okay, that was the seaboard job.
No, Crown Zillerback owned the timber, and that was tree length piling going to Wyckoff over in Bainbridge Island.
Okay. Is that the job that when I interviewed Wally, he was talking about you guys were hooking up the tops and dragging them down top first?
Yep. Well,
Okay.
they wanted me to come down by the butt, and Jim Grant was the guy from Wyckoff, and
Okay.
he watched me bring them down off that rock cliff, and I told him, I says, I can do better if you go by the top. Oh, you cannot. I said, okay, do it whatever way you want. So we finally did it my way, and he had better success.
So
This
that's
picture right here of this Medill
yeah.
was, what's it say, in March of 1980.
Yeah.
That's when Sean just come to work. I just painted that yarder for Wally, and put it on its first job after it was painted. And then the D69U was 1954 or 55 that he had from his dad, and I painted that, I think, if I remember right.
Oh, that is the one that was down in his house, I think.
Yeah,
So-
might be.
So this where the road's being pushed in, is that kind of up above 101 where you cross that creek up there?
Yes, my mind's blank. What the hell creek was that? Starts with an F. Anyway, if you're going toward Shelton, on the right straight across from Spencer Creek,
There you go. Okay.
you crossed Spencer Creek, and you headed toward the west.
Yeah.
And that was, I built a road as far as we could go, and that's where I was building a landing. But obviously,
Okay.
if you get too close to the base of the hill,
Yeah.
you're going to get wiped out. I mean, I seen those piling 120 feet, 30-foot trees coming down there. One of them hit, you know, they kept going, and Dennis Warfield was in that 600 Prentice. He's going, it's going to go, no, it'll stop, because usually they hit a stump and stop. This one came down, hit that log loader, which was brand new in 78 at the same time, hit the fuel tank, and the diesel flew.
Oh,
That's how
no.
hard it was. And then on the other side, by the state shed,
Okay.
the other little yarder was working of ours, and they had a rock that was probably tall as you, 6-foot rock, went from all the way to the top of that hill down across 101. Thank goodness the car wasn't there, and landed on the edge of the road. Actually, it was in the middle.
Wow.
And they called me. What do I do? I went out there and went alongside the road with that TD25 International and took the drum line, hooked onto it, because I couldn't go down to gravel.
Yeah.
You know, and yarded it out. But,
Wow.
yeah, this here is 1974, I believe, a load I was hauling from Halden Johnson.
Okay. And then there's that Hitachi you're talking about, Soderlands.
Yeah, I made this cab extension and raised the cab up on that.
Wow. And then there's the BU-84 that Hopkins used to have. when they were downhill, and that's on Mount Jupiter, for Acme Brothers, and he got the haulback brakes too hot, and it had a turn go right through the cab.
It should have been, his 84 should have been Wichita's. Or Eaton, right? Water-cooled brakes.
You know, you'd be right, yeah.
Yeah, it's water-cooled brake on that, looks
And
like.
and maybe I got a bad story. The Chasers who's telling me about that.
Here's my old, I loaded logs in 76 for Wally with that, and then he ended up giving me the machine, and I still got it to this day. One of my old heel booms.
Wow.
And I can't remember what.
Oh, that's
This is me topping a tree next to my shop. That's only all the years I topped trees. I never had a camera to take with me up a tree.
Yeah.
I didn't care about that. I wanted to get the job done, but neighbor's tree I topped.
And you've got a photo floating around of that 171 you were telling me about earlier, don't you?
Yeah, where did I?
Is that in this photo album here?
Might be in that one there. There's the logging truck that I drove for Holden Johnson, and there's my old Roadrunner. Where the hell did I see that picture?
Wish I could remember that guy's name, the Acme Brothers logging. They logged this piece on Mount Jupiter, and I had to drive through their landing to get to where I was
here you
hauling
go.
logs from. There it is.
I think that's the first one that Medill rolled out after I talked to Pat Medill, and he got killed in a plane wreck. But this was way before he got killed.
Yeah.
And it was going down the freeway to my sister's, and I seen it. My son was about 5 or so, and I pulled in and took a picture of it. That one had a Cummins in it.
I'd love to know who ended up with that.
Some of them went to the Philippines, some of them went to Chile. They were selling all different kinds to different countries at the time.
When I talked to Wally and when I had talked to Pat Hanley quite a while back, I was wanting to get a hold of one of these because I guess Loggers World's selling back issues, but you're in this Loggers World, aren't you?
Front page right there, 1977 of May. That's me right there.
That's too neat. And who is that in the truck?
Let's see. I can't remember. Oh, this was Nicky Ward was driving this truck. This was, yeah, the one that he bought from Ray McDonald in 1973.
Okay. Yeah, that's the other thing I like about these is all the old advertisements.
This was the Burger tube with the BU-80 hoist. And then he sold the hoist, and it went to the Philippines, and then we went down to where my uncle worked at Shelton and bought a IU-95 Skagit. You hardly ever hear of them, and the reason is I was telling you about the Skookum with the regenerative brakes.
Yeah.
Skagit made a copy of it pretty much, and Skookum ended up suing them, and there was a lawsuit or something.
Oh.
And we got it going, and it was kind of hard to explain. Your haulback drum was up higher as a waterfall system, but you had another shaft which turned the friction head for the haulback. So if you pull the friction back, it would reverse that drum to feed out slack if you were pull locking. You know, it was pretty unique, and it had a V8 Cummins, a VT 350 horse Cummins in it. And when I went down there, that engine was froze up. Marvin says, I don't know if it's going to ever run. It's, you probably have to pull it apart. So when Wally bought it, I went down there and I pulled the injectors and I shot diesel in it, and I took a bar and I was able to break it loose, and I fired that thing up and it ran just like a
Really?
Buick for a while. We used it on a job, and then finally, I don't know if the guy didn't check the oil or what, and it spun a bearing, so then we put a big Cam 400 in it, or a small Cam 400. Yeah, it's Donnie Thacker and Tommy Boyd.
Wow.
And that picture there is
That's
me
you.
unhooking a turn, and we're over by Teal Lake at Port Ludlow, 1977 for Crown Zillerback.
That is too stinking cool. I'm glad you're able to save this.
Yeah, kind of turning yellow. And that's the scissor boom. I put lots of hours and loaded a lot of logs with that. That was kind of a suicide thing if you didn't understand. And that's why I bought a 30B, and I just bought there a year ago because I was around them, but they're hard to get parts for now.
Now this is the one that the boom went back over center.
One just like this. This
Okay.
particular one,
Uh-huh.
I bid on it at the auction in 1986, and I ran it up to $3,500. And I looked, the guy I was bidding against was Larry Ramsey, that owned Cascade Logger Supply.
Yeah.
Number one, I would have never been able to outbid him. Number two, when I was a little boy, he gave me a ride in his logging truck because him and my dad logged that ridge over there. So he was
Oh.
kind of a friend of the family, and we knew my dad, so I thought there was no sense in running.
Yeah.
He took that down there to Chehalis, sold it to Matt Smith's dad, John Smith. They bought it, and then had Gary Ray running it, and Clint, this kid that I broke in setting chokers, they flipped it over backwards and put the log right through the windshield and almost killed Gary. So that's then they
Wow.
run it after that. But
So the piece that you're talking about, your dad log, that's over on East Quill.
yeah, he worked with Merle Mayberry in about 1960 or so,
I can see it.
59, 60, 61 over there. East Quill, my dad had a little bulldozer, and basically in them days they were called pulpwood loggers, and he just yarded and loaded and hauled to Port Townsend Mill or Port Angeles.
There's Dick. And did Dick work for Wally?
Yeah,
Pretty much.
He cut for Wally for years. That's where Dick retired, working for Wally. Yeah, it's almost all the people that I grew up with. They're all dead now. The guys that are in this picture that I worked with, almost every one of them. Wally, Dick, Dennis Warfield's still alive. Tommy Boyd's done. Young Thacker Donnie is still living, but
Wow. There he is. Oh.
it's him. And there's Pat and Gary.
And you never worked for Hanley and Phillips, right?
I never did. I worked with this guy and went to school with him right there, Randy Robbins.
Okay.
And I can remember the morning we were working up they were working at, I think they were working at Rocky Brook. They had the 84, if I remember right, and they were out quite a ways. And my crew wanted to ride the rigging out.
Okay.
And it was right after November, if I remember right, and I never trusted anybody because hunting season, they'd come in and try to steal the blocks. And I says, no, until I've yarded a day and you've checked the rigging, I'm not going to walk out because it's downpour raining on a Monday morning. Chadwick went to send the crew out on the rigging, Randy and Mike Love. Mike Love still lives here in this town.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And got out there and couldn't hold the skyline no more and started to come down. Well, Randy and Mike, I think they both jumped, I don't know, 30 feet up in the air or whatever. But when the skyline come down, it was whopping Randy on the chest right here, and it broke his collarbone.
Oh, no.
And kind of screwed his knees up. And I think Mike Love ended up screwing his knees up because they free fell to get out from under that 5,000 pound carriage or whatever they were using.
There's Dennis. So, oh yeah, Stacy Corning here.
Yeah, last I heard, Stacy was hooking over for years over in the Bellingham area, and he was a really good worker. But I mean, hell, he's a year younger than me. I can't imagine he could still be doing that. I haven't heard. I worked over to Arlington and asked some people, but nobody knew him.
He worked for, I think it was Dave Nielsen up there, or Alert. I can't remember, but anyhow, he was.
He might have worked for Alert. Yeah. You worked over there too, didn't you? A while. In that area?
I just hauled logs over there, but apparently he was.
So you've heard of Stacy?
Yeah, Bill Morris's kid was working with him, and Stacy was the lead hook, and they had him on salary, and he pretty much would go around and sort of side rod their jobs and talk to their hooks, and he got out of it though. I guess last I heard he was running log loader for some outfit that was working down by Shelton.
Good for him. Yeah, I hadn't seen him for years. I don't know, him and his dad got into confrontation or something, and Stacy wouldn't come around. I don't know if Stacy had kids and Jim wanted to see the kids or what. I can't. Jim told me, and I that was years ago. And Stacy, he was one of the funniest guys I ever worked with. Very smart, knew what he was doing.
Yeah, I've heard more stories about him as the main guy working up there from Bill Morris's kid. He's all sorts of good stories about Stacy and
Yeah.
all the different stuff he'd come up with for their big towers.
This is my brother-in-law had some sequoias. This one's, I don't know, 5-6 foot in diameter, and I got
Yeah.
them sitting out here at the sawmill, and that's what I'm going to try to saw and make a fence so the county don't whine and snivel.
Yeah.
I
Well,
got lots more, but Janet had to go to town, and she says, I can't rip the house apart looking for 'em. And,
Oh shoot. Well, Ken, I really appreciate you taking the 2 hours it's been to talk to me and give me a share with me
thing
your
that
life story.
I did do with this carriage, that is kind of a neat little story. The Forest Service and me, I never really got along with, because they weren't too intelligent and they couldn't think. They thought they could, some of them, but we did a job up on Goober Pond, up at Elk Lake,
Oh, yeah.
Jefferson Lake, Jefferson Ridge, up the Hamma Hamma.
Mm-hmm.
And it was nice big wood, and I could have picked to choose which units I wanted.
Yeah.
And what we didn't want was going to get farmed out. So Pat
Yeah.
Hanley got the second ones from Seaboard. So there was this downhill chunk where I was telling you I knocked that big white fir, knocked the top right below.
Yeah.
Washington Mountain is right there, and it's a big rock cliff, steeper than hell, straight up and down. And my son, the oldest one I remember, was probably 2 years old, and I went up there the night before we had to sign the contract and decide if we wanted it. And I put Kenny on my shoulders and went straight up the side of the mountain to look at how can I log this. I found that big tree, which was fine, but right behind the tree is a solid cliff, mountain. So I picked another tree that was a little bit smaller, but still big,
Yeah.
to where I could have the tail. But I was like this, so you get
Oh, yeah.
a block and a bite on your tree,
Uh-huh.
because it's straight up and down this way and straight up and down that way. So 7/8 straps that I used for years would snap. Mike got his old limb, let's go. So once we said yes, we'll log it, the blueprint, the contract for the Forest Service said that it had to be a 90-foot tower.
Oh.
And our 90-foot tower, Wally told him we were going to log with, was the Skagit, but we weren't going to take it up there. He'd sold the hoist to Filipinos, and
Oh, yeah.
Al Sherman didn't know. He was from Hoodsport, the Forest Service guy. So Wally says, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I says, well, is there anywhere on that contract that says where the shivs have to be? No. So I told, we had to have a meeting. So they brought people in from Washington, D.C. and had this big meeting at this big table down at Hoodsport Forest Service Station. Wally says, I'm going to let you do all the talking because you understand this. I really don't. I said, okay. Well, what are you going to do, Ken? How are you going to log that? You going to take the Skagit up? No, I'm going to take the Medill up. Well, you can't log it. Well, what do you mean I can't log it? Got to have a 90-foot tower. I says, well, you want to come down to the shop and look at it? I says, we got a pole tied on it. We'll put a flag on it. Top of that pole is 90 feet. Is there anywhere in this contract that says where the shivs have to be?
Oh, no.
Well, they all start scratching their head. No, well, I've already checked, and that 3/4 haulback won't hold those big, 30,000-pound turns, those blocks, because it was 100% suspension.
Oh,
It had
wow.
to be 100% suspension. And I says, oh yeah, I can do it, and I didn't know that. I knew it was 100% suspension, but I was kind of trying in my head, how the hell can I do that? And I thought of this real quick. I says, well, you're a smart man, Al. And everybody, he gets a big smile on his face, and I says, yeah, this guy's pretty smart, and I'm telling the rest of the guys, I says, you know what happens when you put a block in the bite? Well, you double the pole. I says, I'm going to hang a block on the back of that carriage, and I'm going to tail hold my haul back up to he says, well, I called my deal, and they says, you can only hold back, I can't remember what they said, 15,000 pounds. And them turns aren't going to make it at that angle. I did all the math. And I says, well, when you put a block in the bite, you double your pole. 15 is now 30, right? And he's like, yeah. I says, I'll tail hold at the top. Now I've got my 30,000 pounds pole, right? The Skyline, 110,000 pound pole on the bottom tier, and I'm out all the way over 1,000 feet. I'm going to be to the bottom tier, so I can suspend that, right? And then he didn't know what to say. And I says, he's smart. He'll figure it out. He's down there. Is that right, Al? Is that right, Al? The Forest Service guys are right. Yeah, that's right.
Oh,
so
wow.
I go up there, rig up the Medill, and I says, now, not only am I going to show you how I'm going to do this, but there was a big hill right behind on the road, and I took the cat and I leveled that hill up, and I yarded that 071 up that hill.
Oh, okay.
which was the cut bank.
Yeah.
And I got up on that hill. Now I've gained 40 foot of lift.
Wow.
And I just crashed him in the middle of the road. Worked slicker than hell. Finally, I told the logging trucks, I says, when you meet them Forest Service cars, you get on the big radio, you do whatever you send word up and let me know. So sure as hell, they call up. Yeah, Forest Service is on their way up. So I get a hold of Monty's hooking. And I said, Monty, the Forest Service is on the way. So light turns.
Yeah.
So it's foggy. Thank goodness it's foggy. So the only thing they can see is the first 50, 80 feet
Yep.
off the landing, you know. So I hold the haul back tight and pump it up, and I just have it hooked direct to the back of the carriage, no block and bite. And, oh yeah, that's working good, you know. So finally they leave and the fog clears and, okay, back to normal, you know.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I used to have fun with them guys.
Oh, it's too bad there aren't more photos or any video from back then. That would be so neat.
Yeah, then that Pete Blanchard, you know, he was a guy that came here from New York, went through logging forestry school,
Mm-hmm.
and wanted to go into the Forest Service. So he
Yeah.
gets in the Forest Service, and the stories I heard, he kind of had a drinking problem. So he was sitting in Harrington's in Port Angeles, and
Mhm.
that gas line, you probably weren't even born yet, and it blew up First Street, blew the whole thing out. And it was like, I don't know, middle of the night, and he's sitting at the bar, and it blew him out, but it didn't kill him. You know, he had false teeth and stuff. So
Wow.
anyway, he was the head of the Forest Service, you know, down here.
Okay.
So he would always, you know, his famous words was, God, Ken, I hate to do this, but I got to shut you down. It was always something.
Yeah, right.
Oh, today the humidity's too low, or your piss can didn't pass. So we had to, you know, I had to set him up, you know.
Uh-huh.
So if we knew that we didn't have all of the proper stuff, you know, we'd go up here to Buck Mountain, up here to the gas station and get one piss can from Jack Renskers, and then when we'd see him coming, you're supposed to have one at every tail block, but we only had one. So he'd check it out on the landing, and then when he's walking up there, you know, we'd put it in a duffel bag, send it up on the carriage, and Monty knew he'd get it, you know, then he'd
Yeah.
check the tail block, then check the corner block, and Monty would run like hell and put it over there, you know. We got by
Wow.
with that for a long time. We were out there, I can't remember where we was working, somewhere on the Forest Service. He says, well, I got to check your power saws. And if a machine had a turbo,
Yeah.
you didn't need the spark arrestor, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
So he picks up this old chainsaw that we had, and we're all eating lunch in the crew bus, and Sean Loring says, well, this one don't pass. And Sean Loring says, that's got a turbo on it, Pete. And he looks, and he's looking where's the turbo? Yeah, that's one of those new stills. It's got a turbo. We were laughing. Mike McCone was in there, and I can't remember Kip Kincaid or Pat Kincaid, and they're choking on a sandwich. You know, so
Oh, that's too
it's got
funny.
a turbo on it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we used to screw with him. You had to survive.
That's too funny. Well, Ken, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you talking with me.
Yeah, you bet. There's a lot of other stuff, but I can't remember too good anymore.
Well, might be another installment then to catch up on the rest of it, huh?
Yeah.
All right, you take care.